What if the person who hurt you never came back to make it right? What if the apology you've been waiting for was never meant to come? And what if even without it, you could still be free? Forgiveness doesn't always arrive with a dramatic moment of closure. Sometimes it slips in quietly, not with words, but with silence. A silence that's not empty, but full of everything you've carried for years. Some wounds don't bleed. They don't scream or scar. They just stay quietly embedded beneath the surface, invisible to others, undeniable to you. They wait for clarity, for justice, for healing. Sometimes for a single human word, asterisk. Sorry, asterisk. But what if that word never comes? What if the person who owes it to you can't speak it? Or won't? Do you hold your breath forever? Do you shrink under the weight of silence? Or do you find another way, a deeper way, to free yourself? There was a time I replayed it all on a loop. The day they left, the words they never said, the questions that echoed louder than any goodbye. I didn't want revenge, just recognition. I didn't want them to suffer just to see me. Asterisk. To understand. It hurt. Asterisk. But they moved on, effortlessly, while I stayed behind, tangled in moments I couldn't escape. And the worst part? They never looked back. While I was trapped in a prison of unanswered questions, why didn't they care? Why couldn't they say something, anything? Why did they get to walk away while I carried every shard of what they left behind? And yet, even in that silence, a whisper begins. A shift. A quiet, urging that maybe, just maybe, healing doesn't wait for them. It waits for you. Even in the silence that followed, something began to stir. A quiet realization from the last page that maybe healing doesn't wait for their apology. It waits for your truth. So, one night, I picked up a pen, not to write a letter I'd ever send, not to reopen old wounds, but to make a confession to myself, to speak what had never been spoken, even in my own mind. It began like many stories of pain do, with blame, raw, sharp, honest, fingers pointed in ink, the words heavy with everything I'd held back. But the blame faded, and grief took its place. A tender ache for what was lost, for what I wish had gone differently, for the person I was before it all. And then silence. But not the same kind of silence I had known before. This was different. This silence didn't suffocate, it emptied me. Gently, thoroughly. I wrote everything I had ever wanted them to hear. Every line, every truth, every small heartbreak that had never found its voice. Not because they would ever read it, not because it would change anything, but because I needed it out of me. Because my body was tired of being the archive of their absence. And when I finished, I didn't seal the letter. I didn't fold it neatly. I didn't set it on fire like some dramatic goodbye. I simply breathed. A deep, steady breath, the kind I hadn't taken in years. A breath without shame, without fear, without them. For the first time, their shadow wasn't sitting in my lungs. And as I exhaled, I felt something I hadn't expected. Space, a small clearing inside me, soft, quiet, waiting. Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe it was the beginning of something lighter. Let's follow that breath into what came next. That breath, quiet and unfamiliar, was the beginning of something deeper. Because after releasing the words onto paper, a different choice appeared. One I never thought I'd make. No, They never said sorry. They never returned with explanation or remorse. In fact, they might not even remember the moment that cracked my foundation. But I do. I remember it all. The sting, the silence, the echo of their absence. And yet, I chose to forgive, not to erase the pain, not to absolve them of responsibility, but to finally return to myself. Because forgiveness, real forgiveness, isn't something you give away like a gift. It's something you reclaim. A homecoming to the part of you that was held hostage by someone else's choices. I didn't forgive because they earned it. I forgave because I was tired of living inside a story they no longer cared about. Forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's not pretending it didn't happen. It's remembering without being consumed by the fire. It's feeling the scar and choosing not to pick the wound again. It's choosing softness even when your instincts scream for armor. So I whispered only to myself, I forgive you. No audience. No confrontation. No closure served on a silver tray. Just me, speaking to the version of myself that had been waiting for years. The part of me frozen in time. The one who kept hoping they'd return to make it right. The one who needed me to finally say, enough. Maybe freedom is too. Forgiveness had been spoken softly, but truthfully. And with that whisper came something unexpected. Space. A kind of quiet that didn't ache. Some people will never say sorry. Not because they are heartless or cruel, but because they don't know how. They were never taught. They never learned the language of accountability. And some of the deepest wounds, the ones that left you breathless, will never be acknowledged by the ones who caused them. Not because your pain wasn't real, but because they've never sat with their own. But that doesn't mean healing is impossible. It doesn't mean you're condemned to carry it forever. Healing doesn't ask for applause. It doesn't demand recognition. It simply wants you to stop abandoning yourself. Forgiveness doesn't need a spotlight. It doesn't require a dramatic exchange. It only needs your quiet willingness to come back home, to return to the self you've left waiting. Sometimes the most sacred apologies aren't exchanged across a table. They're whispered in the middle of the night, spoken not to another, but to the forgotten parts of you, the younger version, the silent witness, the soul that stayed behind while you waited for someone else to make it right. That's where true freedom begins. Not in someone else's realization, but in your own release. And now, with that freedom flickering gently, like a candle in the dark, let's step into the final moment where this quiet journey finds its voice. So now, ask yourself gently, who are you still waiting to hear from? Whose silence echoes in the quietest corners of your mind? Whose absence has become louder than any words they could have spoken? And what if today, right now, you stopped waiting? What if the apology you've been aching for was never meant to come from them? What if it was always yours, waiting patiently? Within, whisper it softly. I'm sorry I waited this long to set you free. Let that sentence land not as weakness, but as power. Because maybe the deepest kind of healing isn't when someone else finally sees your pain. It's when you choose to no longer carry it. Not every story ends with justice. Not every wound gets closure. But every soul deserves peace. And sometimes that peace begins with a whisper you speak to yourself. In the dark, in the quiet, at the edge, If this whispered something true to your own journey, breathe with it. Let it linger. Let it move gently through your heart. Let it soften the hard places. And when you're ready, return here, to this space, to Mindful Way Television ***, where healing doesn't shout, it whispers. We're honored to be on this path with you. If this video spoke to something real in you, let us know. Leave a comment below. Your voice matters more than you think. Share this with someone who might need a quiet kind of healing. And if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Every story here is made with care, and we'd love to walk further with you. Our next whisper is waiting, and it might be the one you didn't know your soul needed. See you there.